Settle in, take a slow breath, and let your body find a comfortable position. Tonight, we're going to drift back in time to the rolling waves of the Caribbean Sea, where the smell of salt lingers in the air and the horizon seems endless. But this is not the story of swashbuckling Hollywood heroes or roaring cannon battles. This is a slower, quieter look at life aboard a pirate ship in the 17th century. We'll move carefully through the rhythms of daily life at sea, discover the stories of the most notorious pirates, explore mysteries from the deep, and then step ashore to see the strange, bustling world of the ports where these seafarers gathered. Our goal is not to thrill, but to explore, to paint a detailed picture of a world far removed from the present, full of strange routines, hardships, and surprising beauty. So, imagine yourself stepping softly onto a wooden deck under a pale dawn sky. The timbers creak. Somewhere nearby, a rope groans as it tightens. The air smells faintly of salt, tar, and wet canvas. This is where our story begins. The first thing you notice aboard a pirate ship is the sound. The world is alive with it. The slap of water against the hull, the constant hiss of wind through rigging, the dull creak of masts shifting ever so slightly as the ship rocks on the waves. It is never truly silent, and it never truly still. Imagine waking in a hammock just before dawn. The air is cool and damp, and the smell is a mix of salt water, sweat, and wood that has soaked up the ocean for months on end. You pull yourself upright, the hammock swaying beneath you. There is no private cabin. Not for you. Most pirates slept slung shoulder to shoulder, hammocks packed tightly together, like sardines in a barrel. Breakfast is not much to look forward to. Most mornings you are handed a hard biscuit, we might call it hardtack, that has to be softened in water or ale to be edible. It is dry, dense, and often crawling with weevils, but you eat it anyway. Some mornings there is salted meat, tough and briny, and perhaps a splash of rum to wash it down. Your day is defined by the ship's needs. If you are on watch, you climb to the deck and take your place near the rail, scanning the horizon for the faintest hint of another sail. If you are assigned to rigging duty, you haul ropes and adjust sails, your hands raw and calloused from the coarse hemp. If the weather is calm, you may spend hours simply repairing things, patching sails, scraping barnacles from the hull, or even helping cook the day's meal in the ship's tiny galley. It is not glamorous. There is no constant fighting, no piles of glittering treasure. Instead, there is routine. Endless days of work, punctuated only by rare moments of excitement, the sighting of a merchant ship, the first gust of a storm, the cry of "Land ho!" Discipline aboard a pirate ship was harsh but surprisingly democratic. Unlike naval vessels, where orders came from an officer far removed from the common sailor, pirate ships often elected their captains and shared decisions collectively. Even punishments were voted on, though they could still be brutal. Mutiny was not uncommon if a captain grew too cruel or incompetent. At night, when the day's work is done, you might gather with others near the forecastle. The air smells sweeter now, cooler as the sun drops and the stars come out. Perhaps there is music, a fiddle or a drum, or perhaps just talk. Pirates came from every corner of the world, so the languages mix together in a strange, almost musical jumble. Someone tells a story of a battle or a daring escape. Someone else shares a memory of a faraway home. The sea is both friend and enemy. When the wind is calm, the ship drifts lazily and the heat grows unbearable. When storms hit, the world becomes a deafening chaos of water and wind, and you cling to whatever you can find, praying the ship holds together. And always, there is the smell of salt, the sound of waves, the knowledge that at any moment the ship could chase or be chased. Life aboard a pirate ship was a constant balance of risk and reward, of hardship and fleeting freedom. For many who turned pirate, it was better than the life they had left behind, better than hunger on land, Better than the brutal discipline of the Navy, better than prison. As you drift through this scene in your mind, you might imagine the ship gently rocking beneath you, the slow rhythm of the waves becoming a kind of lullaby. The moon overhead reflects in the dark water, and the wind rustles the sails with a soothing, almost sleepy sound. This is the rhythm of a pirate's life, and with this image in mind, let us move quietly from the ship itself to the lives of the men and sometimes women who became its most infamous captains. As the sound of the waves fades gently in your mind, we turn now to one of the most famous figures of the golden age of piracy, Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. Even the name carries weight, but here we will set aside the lurid myths and look quietly at the man himself. Imagine him not as a roaring terror of the seas, but as a person living out his life on the deck of a ship beneath the same sun and stars as any sailor. Edward Teach was likely born around 1680, perhaps in Bristol, England, though records of his early life are scarce. You might picture him as a young man standing on the docks of that bustling port city, surrounded by the smell of tar and fish, the cries of shipwrights and merchants. Ships came and went constantly, to the Americas, to Africa, to distant ports in the Caribbean. At some point, he went to sea. He may have served aboard privateer vessels during the War of Spanish Succession, which gave him valuable experience in navigation and ship combat. This war blurred the line between legal and illegal seafaring. A privateer's job was to raid enemy ships under government sanction. For many, when the war ended and letters of marque were revoked, the step from privateer to pirate was a small one. When Edward Teach became a pirate, he quickly set himself apart as a skilled leader and tactician. His most famous ship was a former French slave ship he captured and renamed Queen Anne's Revenge. Picture it for a moment. A three-masted vessel, its sails full and snapping in the Caribbean wind. Blackbeard had her outfitted with dozens of cannons, making her a formidable floating fortress. He gained his fearsome reputation partly through careful theatre. Blackbeard was said to tie slow-burning fuses into his beard and hat during battle, so that smoke would curl around his face and give him a demonic appearance. Imagine the sight from a distance. A tall man, his beard dark and wild, wreathed in smoke, as if the sea itself had conjured a spirit of war. But there was more to Blackbeard than fear. Contemporary accounts suggest that he preferred intimidation to bloodshed. Many times, ships surrendered without a fight simply at the sight of his flag. When he did resort to violence, it was usually measured, controlled, enough to maintain his reputation, but not enough to waste lives or damage cargo. His brief career at sea, only about 2 years, was filled with daring raids, but also with diplomacy. He struck deals with colonial governors, bribed officials, and even accepted a royal pardon for a short time, living openly in Bath, North Carolina. Imagine him walking through a sleepy colonial town, dressed not as a pirate, but as a man of means, speaking politely with neighbors and merchants. Of course, the pardon did not last. He returned to piracy perhaps because the life on land felt too still, too ordinary after the freedom of the waves. His end came in November of 1718, when a small fleet under Lieutenant Robert Maynard cornered him near Ocracoke Island. The fight was fierce but brief. Blackbeard was killed, and with him, one of the most enduring legends of piracy was born. But even here, we will not dwell on the violence of his final moments. Instead, picture the quiet that came after. The creak of timbers, the gentle lap of water against the hull, the sails fluttering as the wind settled. A man who had spent his life on the sea was gone, but the ship still floated. The sea still moved. The world went on. The story of Blackbeard reminds us that piracy was as much about survival and strategy as it was about daring raids. It was about carving out a place in a world where many had none. As we leave his story behind, let the sound of those gentle waves guide us towards something different. Not a person this time, but a mystery, something hidden beneath the sea, waiting to be found centuries later. The story of Blackbeard fades. The sea becomes still again in your mind. Now we turn our attention to something that lay hidden for centuries, a shipwreck sleeping beneath the water until curious eyes found it again. The wreck of the Queen Anne's Revenge was discovered in 1996, lying just off the coast of North Carolina, near the very place where Blackbeard fought his final battle. Imagine the ocean floor here. The water is dim and green, shafts of sunlight falling only faintly through the waves. The sand shifts gently, moved by the slow pulse of the current. And there, scattered across the bottom, are the bones of a ship, timbers dark with age, cannons lying half-buried, anchors twisted and stilled. Marine archaeologists began the careful work of bringing this ghost of a ship back to light. Recovery was slow, painstaking. Each object was documented and lifted gently, as though waking something from a deep sleep. What they found tells a quieter, more intimate story of pirate life. Iron cannonballs, some still rusted together, fragments of glass bottles and ceramic plates, once held by human hands during simple meals. A bronze bell, still marked with the year 1705, that once rang out across the deck to signal the change of watch. There were tools as well, hammers, chisels, and even surgical instruments, crude by modern standards, but vital for a crew who might have to perform an amputation far from any port. And there were shackles, remnants of the slave trade that had been part of her earlier life before Blackbeard took her. Picture yourself stepping off the creaking gangplank and onto the wooden pier of a colonial port town. The air here smells different from the open sea, heavier, warmer, carrying the scents of wood smoke, fresh-cut sugarcane, and the faint tang of tar from the shipyards. This is Port Royal, or perhaps Nassau, one of the most famous pirate havens of the late 17th and early 18th centuries. The town is not large, but it is alive with sound. Chickens scuttle across the packed earth streets. Children run barefoot, chasing stray dogs. Merchants shout out their wares. Barrels of salted fish, bolts of coarse cloth, bottles of rum. The wooden buildings lean slightly, their walls bleached pale by the sun, their roofs patched with whatever materials could be found. For pirates fresh from a long voyage, this place is a brief paradise. The first stop is often a tavern. Inside, it is cool and dim, the air heavy with the scent of spilled ale and pipe smoke. Benches creak under the weight of men crowded around rough tables. The conversation is a blend of voices and languages, English, Dutch, French, Spanish, a reflection of the strange democracy of the pirate world. The tavern is a place to spend coin quickly. A meal might include fresh bread, something rare aboard ship, and perhaps roasted meat, cooked over an open hearth until the fat drips and hisses. There might be music here too, a fiddler playing a slow tune in the corner, or simply the murmur of conversation that swells and ebbs like the tide. Step outside, and you might see the governor's house at the far end of the town. Larger than the rest, with a wide porch and a view of the harbor, it is a reminder of the uneasy alliance between pirates and colonial officials. At times, governors turned a blind eye to piracy, even accepted bribes or traded favors. After all, pirate gold had a way of enriching the local economy. Inside such a house, the scene is very different from the noisy tavern. The air is cooler, scented with beeswax from polished furniture. The floorboards are swept clean. Here, people speak softly of trade, of politics, of who might be pardoned and who might be hunted next. It is a quieter world, but just as full of calculation. Beyond the port, plantations spread inland, worked by enslaved laborers. Their lives were far harsher than those of either pirates or governors, and their labor underpinned the wealth of the entire region. Sugar, rum, and tobacco passed through these ports in enormous quantities, feeding the hunger of Europe for luxuries and fueling the very trade that pirates preyed upon. As the sun begins to set in your mind's eye, imagine the harbor again. Ships sit at anchor, their masts forming a dark forest of lines against the orange sky. Lanterns begin to glow along the streets, and the sound of voices drifts out over the water. Somewhere, a ship's bell rings. The day is ending, and soon the pirates will return to their hammocks, to the creak of timbers and the soft slap of waves. Tomorrow, the sea will call them back again. We have walked the decks of a pirate ship, shared their meager meals, listened to their stories beneath the stars. We have traced the short, burning path of Blackbeard's life, peered into the quiet mystery of a sunken wreck, and wandered the dusty streets of a colonial port where gold, rum, and politics mingled freely. Life on a pirate ship was harsh and unpredictable, but it offered a strange kind of freedom, a chance to live by one's own rules, if only for a brief time. As you rest now, let the gentle rocking of the ship return to your imagination. The sails are furled, the night is calm, the stars are bright above the masthead. Listen for the soft creak of rope, the faint sigh of the wind, the steady rhythm of the sea. And with that sound in mind, let yourself drift into the stillness of sleep, as though you too are rocking gently on a quiet ocean, safe and at peace.